the Lord will work for us. Part 2, we have 3 thoughts which we have begun last time: the work of faith, the courage of faith, the triumph of faith. We left off in verse 15. Verse 15 says, "There was a trembling in the host in the field among all the people. And the garrison and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked. So it was a very great trembling." The Lord sent an earthquake to honor the faith of his servant. Deuteronomy 17 verse 23 says, "But the Lord thy God shall deliver them unto thee, and shall destroy them with a mighty destruction until they be destroyed." This was the exploit that took place when Jonathan and his armor bearer, single-handedly we say, killed 20 Philistines in a half acre of field, and that sent shock waves in the field of in the ranks, amongst the ranks of the Philistines, and caused them to see that could it be that there was some great force that was against them. And so they became frightened, as it were, and we can see that the Lord himself also acted, giving strength to the bravery of Jonathan and his armor bearer. Deuteronomy 7 verse 23 says, "But the Lord thy God shall deliver them unto thee, and shall destroy them with a mighty destruction until they be destroyed." This was the promise that God gave to Israel before they enter the promised land, that they would defeat the enemy. God would give them the grace and the strength to have victory over the enemy, and this was the promise that God gave to them. And Israel failed the Lord throughout the period after Joshua's death and the beginning of the period of the judges. Israel did that which was right in their own eyes, and they did not have a king in Israel. Why we speak about having a king? Well, the people needed a leadership, they needed help, and God was their king. God was the one that led them. Without the Lord leading them, they were lost. And instead of seeking the Lord, well, they wanted to have a visible manifestation of divine help, as it were, in the person of a king. And so God gave them their wishes, and they had Jonathan, they had Saul to become their first king. And we saw how things at first went well with them, but there were certain weaknesses that came, that was starkly highlighted by what we can see, which we will see further here, the weakness of a king who ruled by the arms of the flesh rather than led by the Spirit of God. So there is a difference between a spiritual man and one that does not depend upon God or the strength of God, or may not be able to understand the mechanics, the dynamics of life with God in the Spirit. Psalm 14 verse 5 says, there were they in great fear, for God is in the generation of the righteous. God helped his people, and the enemy were discomfited. Exodus 19 verse 18 was given that situation where God sent a quake also, and fire and smoke at Mount Sinai when he first gave the law, to demonstrate his presence with them, to demonstrate, as it were, his leadership. that God is a fearsome God with great power, and that when we have Him with us, there ought to be great trembling, and the trembling of God does inspire fear, and here you see the Philistine army discomfited. When our Lord yielded up the ghost in Matthew 27, verse 50, we saw that the veil in the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. The veil in the temple was to separate the holy place from the most holy place, the very presence of God. And when Christ died, He opened the way for us to enter, as it were, to the very presence of God through His sacrifice on the cross. And so the veil was rent, and there was a quake, and it was a great trembling, signifying the presence of God. And so when this quake came after Jonathan took down 20 men, we say that there was a great fear that came upon the enemy. When God's people are walking with Him and His presence is with them, it inspires fear. Genesis 35 verse 5, when the descendants of Abraham walked in Canaan, God protected them, and it's recorded there, and they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. God saw, or they saw, the presence of God protecting them, guiding them, helping them, and therefore they were afraid, because there seemed to be some mysterious power that is fending for them, that is keeping them, protecting them, that is taking care of them. Leviticus 26 verse 36 to 37 says, "And upon them that are left alive of you, I will send a faintness into their heart in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall chase them, and they shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursueth, and they shall fall one upon another, as it were, before a sword, and when none pursueth, and when ye have no power to stand before your enemies." This was the problem with Israel now. They had no power to stand before their enemies, because they had no strength first to stand before God. When we are before God, and God's strength, His presence is with us, He invites, He gives to us the power that is needed for life. You see, He imparts to us life and strength. But when we are not staying close to God, and when we are not walking with God, that's where problem comes. Daniel 5 verse 6. See how the power of God came upon Belshazzar. And the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loose, and his knees smote one against another. A very graphic description of fear. His knees were trembling and shaking so much that the knees were knocking one against another. Right? 2 Samuel 5 verse 24. And let it be, when thou heardest the sound of a goings in the top of a mulberry trees, that then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. This was David's battle, and the Lord, when they sought the Lord showed them how the battle is to be won. Right? And the sign was this: the sound on top of the mulberry trees, and that's the time, the signal given to attack. So when you have the Lord with us, you see that the Lord guides us and shows us what is needed, what we need to do. As we rest in Him, there is power and strength. God will in some way or other direct the steps of those who acknowledge Him in all their ways and seek Him for direction with purpose of heart? Do we seek the Lord with direction, with purpose of heart? Do we seek for the Lord to guide us, to show us the way daily, moment by moment? I think this must be our spiritual posture, our sanctified demeanor of life. Sometimes we find most comfort in that which is least our own doing, into which we have been led by the unexpected but well observed turns of providence. Sometimes we don't know how to help ourselves. Oftentimes, as a people of God, well, you can just pray and say, Lord, I really don't know what to do, how to handle, but you know, and I rest in you that you are able to take care. And so by some turn of providence, led by the unexpected, but you can see the Lord doing something for you. That's what we are seeing here. Verse 16. And the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitudes melted away, and they went on beating down one another. So the enemy attacked one another, fought one another. So the watchmen of Saul that is in Gibeah, Gibeah was built on a hill where it had its name, and these watchmen or sentinels of Saul was set by him on the highest part there of the city, so that they may overlook the army of the Philistines that were encamped around them, and observe what was going on, their motions, and give notice accordingly of what is going on. And it being broad daylight, they could see the conditions that the enemy was in. They, as Jill well puts it for us, that there was indeed something that it was mysterious that was taking place. The enemy was being defeated. Psalm 58 verse 7. Let them melt away as waters which run continually. When he bendeth his bow to shoot his arrows, let them be cut in pieces. The Lord fought the battle for them that day. Psalm 68 verse 2. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melteth before the fire, so let the wicked perish at the presence of God. And so we are told that the multitude melted away like snow gradually and yet apace, and they could discern their numbers lessening more and more through the slaughter of many made among them by one another, and the flight of others. They went on beating down one another. And so something was happening. They could not fully explain. They didn't do a thing. They were just watching, and the enemy just disintegrated or evaporated before them. Verse 17. Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, Number now and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. So here we see that Saul was having that impression that perhaps a large part of his people were there in the battlefield fighting the enemy, and that is why this could have happened. Well, he asked to number his own men to find out what was going on, and so when they numbered, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. So there were two missing soldiers in Israel's camp, and what was going on cannot tell. Verse 18. And Saul said unto Ahiah, Bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priest, that the noise was in the midst of the Philistines, and went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priest, Withdraw thine hand. Saul, who was impatient of delay, cannot wait till the will of God, or the word of God is being given, is made known to him. And when we follow the Lord's timing, you realize that there's no loss of time. When we don't run before God, but we are willing to wait upon Him, there have been no real loss of time, and he might have been saved from the errors which marked the happiness of the deliverance. But he could have waited. But this precipitancy very well shows the state of Saul's mind. He was not close to the Lord. The Lord was not leading him in his actions. Right? He was just being led in the flesh, and this you can see time and time again. Deuteronomy 20 verse 2. And it shall be, when they are come nigh unto the battle, that the priests approach and speak unto the people. So the priests led the battle. The priests led the battle. They were to be consulted. Numbers 27 verse 21. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord, and at his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. So God's will was that they seek his will. Right? So the system that was in place was that there was a priesthood, and there was the judgment of the Urim to help them to see, discern the will of God. And you remember in 1 Samuel 4, when they went out to battle, when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hands of the Philistines. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the host, Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubims. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, was there with the ark of God, or covenant of God. When the ark of the covenant came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth ran again. Well, they were depending upon not the source of power, which is God, but upon those paraphernalias that does not represent God, but they were simply something that they put their hands on while they depended on themselves. There was a false confidence, confidence on objects. Confidence is amounted to idolatry, I would say. Verse 20. And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle, and behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a great discomfiture. The Philistines, by the power of God, set one against another. They melted like snow before the sun, and they went on beating down one another. Very strange. Every man's sword was against his fellow. When they fled for fear, instead of turning back upon those that chased them, they reckoned those only their enemies that stood in their way, and treated them accordingly. So they saw themselves, their own people, as enemies, and they fought among themselves. Or what kind of a battle plan is that? The battle plan is that you don't need to do anything. The enemy is going to fight within themselves, and then they will destroy themselves, and you don't have to lift a finger. And that's the battle with God. Just as it was when they fought Jericho. What did the Lord tell them to do? Well, they were to march around Jericho 6 times, and on the 7th day, and then shout. Then the walls of Jericho would come tumbling down. And indeed, the Lord's ways are not our ways oftentimes, and God's wisdom is not our wisdom. His ways are higher than our ways. And so you see here, sometimes we think that we are able to reason by ourselves to things, but oftentimes our reasoning is faulty, because we are up against a mysterious power, isn't it, of God, right? And none can stay his hand, and none of those things that is well, I say that the Lord can do is oftentimes beyond our imagination, beyond the strength that we ourselves possess. Sometimes we say to be great by our own standards. Verse 21. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up with them into the camp from the country round about, and even they also turned to be with the Israelites and were with Saul and Jonathan. So he and all the little force he had made a vigorous attack upon the enemy, and all the people were cried together for one of the silver trumpets. God appointed them to sound an alarm in the day of battle. They summoned together by shouting, and their number were not so great, but as they got together, the Lord gave them strength, as Matthew Henry well puts it, and bravery to pursue, to see what was the end of their enemy. Verse 22. Likewise, all the men of Israel which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after him in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Beth-aven. Every Hebrew, even those from whom one would least have expected it, now turned his hand against the Philistines. Suddenly there was a great courage that came upon them when they fought against the enemy. Well, this was the strength that was in the lives of the reformers, isn't it? They were willing to be burned at the stake in order that the faith may not be smitten out, and indeed their faith won the day. And this was the victory that God gave to Israel that day through the courage of two, Jonathan and his armor bearer. They were not faint-hearted, but they were courageous in battle, and the Lord himself helped. You remember Jonathan saying, waiting for a sign from the Lord, and when the Lord showed him, he was in prayer, and God showed him, he immediately knew that the victory would be given. And so you see how the Lord's battle is to be fought in his way, and salvation is of the Lord, and we can do nothing without him, nothing we can do except by his grace. May the Lord strengthen us to keep close to him, to understand what he can do for us, when we can't. Amen.